friends, welcome to all for this Global Security Summit. I have with me several industries stalwarts, and this panel is going to discuss an important topic on the integrated security architecture and approach, which has become very much relevant today, particularly because of the increased risks which we are seeing in the remote access kind of an environment, which we were all perhaps thrown into because of the pandemic. Even otherwise, of course, security is something which we try to improve every time, whether there is a pandemic or not. And as attackers keep on becoming more and more intelligent, we also have to move forward. So this is a continuing race. Now, we all started with security basically with the technology tools, because after all, we were having information security and we had to protect it through information related devices only. In fact, we actually improved the technology to such an extent that very soon we tried to bring in artificial intelligence and other automated security devices so that possibility of errors and omissions which could be there if entire thing is handled by humans would be reduced. But then the cycle has again gone forward. Now we are again thinking whether we should completely eliminate the human intervention, or we should bring it back so that the human intelligent person will use the tools and get the integrated security which we want, which could be perhaps better than the multi-factor security designing, which we might have used somewhere in between. So to discuss this very interesting topic, I have with me Mr. Sachin Jain, Mr. Sinha, Mitali Sharma, Manoj, Naseem Halder, and Ravi. I will not take the liberty of introducing each of these stalwarts. I would rather like each of them to very briefly introduce themselves before we start with our session. Maybe we can start with Mr. Sachin Jain because he occupies the leftmost position. Okay.
Yeah, I'm probably at the wrong place. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sachin Jain. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and CTO at Cognize, with operations in Canada and India. And before this, I was at Evaluserve in the capacity of global CIO and CISO. I worked there for almost 21 years. And yeah, so far it's going interesting in the cybersecurity domain.
Thank you. Mr. Sinha.
Hi, I'm Suhabrata Sinha, Suha to all my friends and pretty much everyone in the industry. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer of NXP Semiconductors, which is a global semiconductor leader which focuses on silicon solutions with a focus on security. And we are present in Europe, US, and with manufacturing facilities in Asia as well. Yeah, my role there primarily is around security strategy and protecting the enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you. Mitali, then go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Mitali Sharma, and I head the Risk, Compliance, and Information Security at SDG Corporation. Been in the industry for almost 2 decades. And right now, as Sachin also mentioned, there is a lot going on in the cybersecurity space. So managing that for the organization.
Thank you. Manoj?
Hi everyone, this is Manoj Srivastava. I'm CISO and DPO for Future Generali India Insurance. So I'm primarily responsible for information and cybersecurity and data privacy for the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Naseem?
Hi, myself Naseem Halder. I am CISO of Echo General Insurance. and managing the cybersecurity, information security related enterprise risk for Ecogel instruments.
Thank you. Mr. Ravi?
Hello, everyone. This is Ravi Hirolikar. I'm the global CISO for Ocwin Financials, been in the industry for more than 25 years and have seen a lot happening in the cyberspace over the years. Looking forward to the panel discussion.
Friends, just to add my own brief introduction, I am actually not a CISO category. I come from the data protection area. Of course, I was a banker earlier and then moved into cyber laws and presently in data protection. I am the chairperson of FDPPI, Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India. So we are trying to actually prepare data protection officers to actually challenge all of you CISOs in the corporate hierarchy. Okay, but it's interesting to have all of you here to discuss this very important topic. So I think we should start with understanding or defining the scope of our discussion by defining the concept. Say what we call as this integrated security approach. Let us spend a few minutes on understanding what is this integrated security approach and how does it different from any other security approach. I think once we are clear with that, our audience will also be able to appreciate the further discussions which will follow. I think we should start with Mr. Sinha on this particular question. That is, how do we define the concept of the integrated security approach in your say perception?
Thank you. The concept of integrated security approach, I think, is simple to explain, but difficult to execute, like most things that try to simplify complex constructs. So the way I look at it is that security in most enterprises, so unless you are a startup which has been born in the last 18 months, right? I mean, you have a legacy. You have factories, you have businesses, you have supply chains, you have users all over the country or even the world. So you have a legacy. And as in any organization, security investments and security initiatives that get built up in layers over a period of time. And that keeps adding on to complexity. It cumulatively starts becoming more and more complex. Also, the organization tends to organize themselves. The teams tend to be the organizational hierarchy, the team structure, everything tends to get set, focusing on either technologies or individual functions. And that starts creating its own silos. So the approach to integrated security is to be boundaryless in how we look at security. That's to start thinking from two different points of view. Number one, think from the point of view of the attacker. We care about our departments, our products, our hierarchies. Attackers don't give a damn. All they see is an organization, maybe badly protected, and something valuable that they can steal. That's all that they care. They will take the shortest path to the pot of gold, and they don't care about our architecture, our infrastructure, our hierarchies. So we have to start thinking like an attacker, which means we have to see holistically, and that's where integrated security approach comes in. Second, which is probably also very germane to today's discussion, is to take the point of view of the user. What does the user do? What is the user persona? How does she work? Where does she work? What are the common user behaviors? And once we put ourselves in the user shoes, we start looking at security very differently. Again, it is very simple, but typically this information security profession has designed tools and processes to make our life simple, and conversely, often the user's life complicated. You make the user's life high friction, difficult to do things. And then we are surprised that, the users don't appreciate us, right? Because we have not taken a integrated, holistic, user-centric approach to how security should be done. And to me, that's the opportunity for how I look at integrated security. Look at it holistically, move from the complex to the simple, reduce entropy. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have another view maybe from Mr. Manoj. I'll come back to you, Sachin. I will actually try to go around all the people as much as possible. Okay. Mr. Manoj, can you add your thoughts to this concept of integrated security approach? We talk of layers and then components. So just to try to give some thoughts to people like us to understand how does this multi-layered system contribute to this integrated approach?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, and I am in complete agreement with Subos. Moving from complex to simple. Just would like to add few things on that. The first thing of integrated security approach is educating the stakeholders. I mean, we have different business functions. We have developers. They develop for business, and then certainly things come to security for do VAPT and all. And then we have n number of reasons to block the service and thereby business. So if security not only do assessment and help organization to minimize risk, but also educate the stakeholders. I mean, business, IT. For an example, it was a case of software development, then bringing in secure coding practice in culture, bringing in software development, lifecycle management. That will minimize the risk to overall risk to organization, and that is a very basic thing to educate the employees and stakeholders. It is nowadays, it is not only security by design, but it's also privacy by design, because I'll give an example like maybe you are going to install any application in your mobile. All the norms of secure coding practice, SDLC, are followed. But what data I'm capturing from end user, that also should be need to know basis. If I don't require, full command on the camera or the SMS or the, media of the mobile, why should I? And that is, secure privacy by design. So I think integrated security approach is not only securing device or data in terms of confidentiality, integrity, availability, but also in terms of privacy, and both collaborate security and privacy together as an integrated security approach in the current era where a lot of dependency we have on digitization and online channels.
Okay, thank you. Sachin, you want to add?
Yes, Navi, thanks. And while I agree with what Manoj and Suva said, I'll just maybe add something on top of what Suva was mentioning. See, if we look at all those legacy organizations, they have evolved from a perimeter network to a borderless network, and traditionally we have seen those perimeter controlled network data centers. Now, if we see over the period of time, the different components, I mean, pandemic has expedited a lot of other projects and initiatives. But if you look at even before pandemic, cloud has taken its own space, remote working was happening. And if we see DevOps, like Manoj mentioned, and we have so many options these days where people are actually using components from different facets of the technology architecture. And if we combine that all together, that's actually called the integrated security approach, because you still have the perimeter to manage, you still have the cloud to manage, you have then DevOps security, you have then all those remote users who have actually added a lot more security related challenges. And as Suva was mentioning, I think attackers need a sweet spot, and that sweet spot can be a user who's sitting at home and using a weak internet at home, and if that user has some access privileges which can be elevated to get control of your network, then it's all compromised irrespective of how good you are at security and how much you have invested. That doesn't make much sense. But you have to look at the security and as a complete and integrated approach, where you have to look at all people, process, and technology as those traditional important pillar. But you have to look at that, all those layers as you were mentioning, and that defines in the current scheme of things how you actually look at those things to avoid any risk.
Thank you. I liked your describing it as an integration of the people, process, and technology, the different elements. Now, let me try to find out from Mitali about what do you think are the components of this integrated security system?
So I think a lot of it, Sachin and Mr. Sinha, they've already covered it. So I think when it comes to the elements of an integrated security approach, I think first and foremost, you need to understand what is your landscape, what is your current threat landscape, like what all are the areas where you see risks to the organization. Like with, it's an agile world, and with the changing things, like you moved on from a normal working area to a remote working environment. So those threat landscape, those threat vectors, they've completely changed. So it's very important first to understand what you need to protect. What are those crown jewels of the organization that you really need to protect? What are those controls that you need to have in place? Where all my data is residing, whether it is coming from SOC, whether it is coming from NOC, whether it is from DLP, and every endpoint right now, every user has become a custodian of your information. So every user's machine has now become a data center for you, rather than just restricting it to that perimeter security, whether your applications are moving to cloud. So it's very important first to understand where all that data is residing, what is the threat landscape, risk landscape of my organization. Then you need to go ahead and build the controls and defenses around it, rather than just thinking that, okay, maybe NAC would be helpful for my organization, or DLP might be helpful for my organization, or just setting up a SOC would be important. Rather than that, it's important that you first see whether it really is needed for my organization or not. Or maybe it's just that I need to have maybe more of awareness within my employees, so that they become the custodians of that information and they understand the risks. Maybe I need to have just the phishing simulations going on, or protect myself from having the right kind of backup, recovery, and restoration procedures, or the business continuity procedures in place. So I think that's where you need to first understand your threat landscape, then look at how you can get that integrated security approach in place and have a holistic view from a CISO standpoint. You can get that holistic view of the compliance posture of the organization. I think that would be my take on what is needed to start for the integrated approach.
Mr. Naseem, actually, we sometimes talk of adaptive authentication in terms of particularly the banking industry. Of course, authentication is always an important component of any security. And we even Reserve Bank of India has spoken about this adaptive authentication, essentially meaning that in the real time, you have to decide what kind of factors you use for the authentication, and don't stick to something which even the attacker knows this is the process of authentication. So keeping that in mind, now how does this adaptive authentication sink into this concept of integrated security approach? Can you elaborate on this a little?
Sure. So before I start, let me share one fun factor about the word security. I hope all of you will have some more I would say enjoy this thing. So if you see the spelling of security, if you balance it, first three words is sec and the last three word is ity, right? So in between you will get your. So that's the fun factor. Security is not complete till the time your activity, your participation is not there. So that's the basic of security. So understand these things, and that is what we are talking about, the integration or integrated security. Now talking about the adapted access management. So it's depend on how exactly I have designed my architecture. Let's see, if I talk about company like Echo, who's born in complete cloud-born company, like I don't have I think Subhrata might spoke about legacy. Definitely, everybody is having certain legacy, everybody is having certain problem, but it's totally depend on how exactly you have designed your architecture. If I talk about a company like Echo, in our HR policy, they have a policy that if anybody wants, they can have at least 2 months, 3 months time work from home, and that is before the pandemic. So that is what your approach, your adaptive when this kind of policy you are enabling for the organization, you have to have this kind of control to implement in your architecture. So if I talk about ICO, then we have JTA solution. We have already have a JTA architecture is already implemented, zero trust architecture. So I don't trust any. I don't want that any of my users should remember their laptop's password. They should remember their password of n number of other application. I only trust you as a user only from a one device which is assigned to you. Or I would say whatever BOD device we have assigned to you, we are recognized, we are approved those things. So password definitely one thing. Additionally, we can have second factor authentication to having a adaptive authentication, because it's a password. It can be hacked, right? It can be. I would say the chances of hacking password comparing having a second factor is much more lesser. If you have a adaptive authentication, like you are giving an OTP, right? Even you have to think like you are asking your people to give a great experience to your customer. Then in the same time, it's your responsibility what kind of experience you are giving to your employees, right? If you're not enable the best technology solution or best digital solution for them, they will not be able to think that what is going on in the market, right? So it's all about experience, how exactly you are giving, how exactly they are adopting. So if I don't want to remember any password, I don't want to check anything, I want to access, I will check my OTP, I will check my authentication app, I will put that code 6 digit or 8 digit, and I will get my login. So it will be much easier. The acceptability of having this kind of architecture is, I would say it's very easy for any CISOs to implement. Yes, there will be challenge. I would say acceptability from the user level. Yes, there will be challenges in terms of your architecture, in terms of your crown jewel, how exactly you want to protect. So this need lot of analysis, lot of back and forth will happen, but that I think that is the best approach for adaptive authentication.
Yeah, so Ravi, actually Naseem actually spoke about this multiple factors like the OTP and other things. But nowadays people talk of using GPS location, RFID devices, even video monitoring. For example, when we want to do KYC online, we actually expect some kind of a video selfie kind of a thing to be shown, kind of a thing. And when we start using this kind of remote systems for more complicated or more critical applications, so like today we are even having court proceedings on camera or something like that. So apart from the well-known, let us say the OTP kind of authentication, what else do you think is essential to actually make this remote authentication more robust?
There are multiple technologies and implementations available. One is the risk-based authentication or adaptive authentication based on the user profile, the risks perceived, the type of applications that you're accessing. It could throw multiple additional factors. That could be one way, I think. And of course, in the current remote setup for organizations, definitely we need to look at as a mandatory control, you must have multi-factor authentication. And there you can have a certificate-based authentication. You can have an OTP kind of a model. So all multiple, implementations are possible. And going back to your, I think the first question about integrated security approach, while I definitely agree with my co-panelists on, the understanding with different connotations of the terminology, I look at it from the board's perspective, right? As a board, they would ask a CISO, is my data safe? Is my network safe? And are we resilient, right? So I look at these main three risks that the board would ask, and any perspective of implementation that would answer these questions, is an integrated approach. So I cannot say, for example, that my on-prem setup is secure, but my cloud setup is not. I cannot say that my enterprise controls are robust, but my supply chain is weak. I cannot say that I have my end users, aware, but my leadership is not going through awareness training. So integrated approach would look at all those aspects, and of course on consolidating as many tools as possible in terms of managing these security controls. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested in discussing at least one example. For example, we all are aware of the Uber auto car accident, no, that auto driver car accident in Arizona. Okay. And people have been discussing what went wrong in this particular car accident, because it involved perhaps, I don't know, a failure of sensors, failure of the software which converted the inputs from the sensors into a mechanical braking decision. And this was one in kind of an integrated system where it was not only the software which was involved in the decision making, the external inputs which were coming perhaps through the connectivity systems which were there, plus there was a human being sitting behind the wheel who was part of the security. That is, the whole system was supposed to have triggered some kind of an alert, so that when necessary, the human had to also intervene. So this was a classic example of a system which had, let us say, the remote input of data, then software working both within the car, maybe on the cloud also, and the human. So if this is considered as an integrated system, and we are looking at managing the security of such a system, now, how do you react to being, let us say, CISO of this Uber project, and say, where do we identify our weaknesses? Mr. Sachin, I think, is the person who has to go ahead with his viewpoint.
Yeah, I think having my window as a first person on your left, yeah. No, but yeah, when you were talking about that accident, I was actually thinking how AI is playing a role in the security framework, and as security and AI both are actually see a different maturity curve, and you're right. I mean, there are systems which can throw a lot of data on you, and as we know now, because of a lot of you can say tools, technologies, and because of this expanded shape of the security framework, there is a lot of data which is getting generated, and it's humanly impossible to track and analyze all this data. You need actually machine. You need all those automation to make sense of that data, correlate that data, and throw some meaningful results to you, which can, again, further, either you can take that further to automate it, maybe as a next step, where you apply some decision making based on that data. And again, there are combination. Either you involve human intelligence to take those decisions, or you take machine to take that decision. And what happens? I mean, we have seen, and there is obviously a lot of research going on. If we completely rely on machine, and even in this case of, let's say, security, if we decide, let's say, if there is an attack and you need to block, what if this is going to be a false positive? And what if it has a huge impact on your business? I mean, we are talking about an accident, and that accident can be maybe shutting off a business and maybe leading to millions of dollars of revenue loss. You need to bring that intelligence, where to block, what kind of decision has to be taken. And I think we are at a stage where this human intelligence and a machine intelligence has to coexist. And I think time will tell us, we don't know whether in our lifetime or maybe in maybe our kids will see probably this maybe a glorified and maybe a more mature automation in this place, which can actually bring a perspective which is not just a traditional AI, but is more of a neural science into it, and bringing that kind of decision making.
Yeah. Now we will go to Manoj. I've got a specific question, of course, as a follow-up for this Uber incident, and also in many smart city projects, law enforcement projects, we have got multitude of CCTVs, and some human being has to interpret those things. And today we are trying to have artificial intelligence interpret and at least throw up something which needs to be looked at by a human being. Secondly, sometimes we feel that there is a privacy issue when you are having surveillance, and therefore it is always better that the first layer of filtering is done by the system, so that we don't know who is walking here and there or something like that. But if there is a suspicious movement, by gait analysis or something like that, the software detects that, or the facial recognition, then it escalates it to a human being, so that the combination of the system and the human being comes in there. In fact, Uber was also one such thing where they had designed the system in such a manner that at least on this test drive, there was a human sitting and he would perhaps react and brake if necessary. And I was going through one of the recent studies on the US election system, particularly the postal ballot system. I don't know whether you had an occasion to look at it. They had thrown up a concept called visual cognitive fatigue. Okay, that is, you put a human being to look at the screen and then perhaps come up with some action at the appropriate time. Say 99.5% or more time, he does not have to do anything. So only that 0.5% it is required. That is where this fatigue comes in. So when you are creating an integrated system, particularly a system which combines the software along with the human intervention, Manoj, what kind of challenges we face to avoid the security failures of the type we have seen in this Uber accident?
My submission would be, see, if we are losing data, if there is a data breach or compromise, that can be acceptable. But if we are losing human beings, that cannot be acceptable. I mean, there is a unrecoverable loss. So and the second thing is, if everything is defined in SOPs and can be automated, we don't need human intelligence at all. We could have deployed robots everywhere, robot X CISO of Y company. No, we in fact require human intelligence, and definitely AI and ML, these things can add value to take some good decision by human beings. It should not be in other way around. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the important thing. And when it comes that we are into very sensitive design, where IoTs, sensors, softwares are working with each other to take some decision, and some analytics into action, then up to certain layer, because if we have 1,000 cars, suppose 1 million cars, and if the false positive is 0.5%, still we have chance of dying 500% every year. And that is, of course, not acceptable. So there has to be some break glass process, and there should not be any kind of single point of failure. And security is, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We don't actually, look into that the system. So information may not be confidential for me, but that may be confidential for somebody else. Like, we are into 31st March. If my balance sheet is not published, that is very sensitive. But once it is published, it is available in public. So like that way, we have to implement applied security. I mean, we have, n number of security. If you implement everything, the security budget will, increase, will go more than IT budget. But there has something, applied security. If it is IoT, if it is software decision making, then, the productivity, the security, and the, credibility of software has to be tested. Integration, maybe, the car is running at the speed of 100 and someone suddenly comes in. If it takes maybe 2 seconds to take some decision, that 2 seconds is not acceptable, because human brains work in nanosecond to stop the car. So that kind of foreseen and unforeseen scenarios And when analytics is coming into action, what kind of impact is going from that decision, that has to be properly taken care of. And you rightly said that, yeah, it add values up to certain layer, in protecting privacy. Like, we have a lot of CCTV cameras in society here and there. Then smart concept of smart cities and all. So definitely, AI and ML add a lot of values. Like, I was going through a lab where, in a tall bridge, a lot of vehicles were crossing, but suddenly they found one vehicle which was, very new. Okay, and it is going to some railway station, and in the railway station, a face was very new. So the system, given alert to the, human being that this face is, looking suspicious. We haven't seen this face in last 10 years. We could not find it in our database. There was a vehicle, then automatically they started tracking, and finally there was some connection, and it was a terror attack kind of. It was simulated lab. But yes, it was possible even in lab because of, artificial intelligence. So a proper balance is very much important, and we should not rely only on the artificial intelligence or machines when it comes on the life of human.
I think you have highlighted that our decision to integrate and the depth of integration we want to have should also take into view what will be the impact, whether it will be a critical life-threatening impact or not, and then take a decision. Fine. Now, if we look at an organization, now let us now look at, as a CISO, what are the key drivers which you feel make you think about changing the current legacy system, whatever you are adopting, into a higher level, next generation information security system, including this particular concept of this integrated security approach. I think Mitali can say something on that. As an organizational head of CISO, when do you think you will have to move ahead from the legacy system into this kind of an integrated systems? What are the examples or drivers?
So I would again say the same thing. The first and the foremost for me would be the changing threat landscape. So let's say, if my organization earlier, everybody was sitting in an infrastructure in a facility which was monitored, which was, they were in a facility which was secured. Now, if suddenly everybody has moved on, I mean, pandemic came in and everybody moved on to remote working. So which means that, we need to relook at how we used to have our security framework. We need to relook at the tools, technologies that were implemented within the organization, not just the tools and technologies, but also the processes that were followed. For example, you said in physical security that if tailgating is going to happen, this is the penalty, or this is the disciplinary action that you would take. Now, what would you do if somebody is working from home, they are working on their laptops, and, a family member comes in and peeps into the information? What would you do to that? So, those kinds of relook at the complete security landscape, relook at complete tools, technologies that were being used. Everything moved on to cloud all of a sudden, like, some things which were on-prem, people decided and accelerated that movement and moved things to cloud. So it becomes very important that now your identity access management moves from just being on-prem to the cloud security. You need to relook at the vendors that are giving you cloud security. So that way, the entire landscape, entire security posture, that the way you were measuring it, it completely changes. In a way, the awareness training, which was just maybe in some organizations, it was just a check in the box saying that, yes, we have our organizations aware, we have the employees aware. Now you really need to have those employees aware, and you need to have those efficient controls to understand how much aware the employees are. That could be moving into a zone where you start doing certain phishing simulations and testing how much are my employees secure, how much my employees know about it. Once you have done that, I mean, whatever controls you implement, either you have already been breached or you would be breached in the next few days. So that's the current situation of cybersecurity that I would say in your organization. So first of all, as a CISO, I think it's very important that I accept this fact that this is what is going to happen, or this is something that has happened. So it's important, like Manoj, Ravi, they also pointed out that the very most important thing that the executive management would ask the CISO would be, is my data secure and how resilient I am? So it becomes very important that, you know, those incident response plans, those data breach response plans that you had from a very long time, have you revisited them and have you really tested them, or they are just the ones on paper? Do the people really know what they should do when a cyber incident happened, or do they really know how to reduce the impact of a particular risk that is going to happen, so that it does not end up leaving you in a reputational loss, in a financial loss, or in the loss of life? So I think those would be the aspects that I would think should be considered.
Thank you. We will go to Suhabrata again. See, Mitali highlighted the increasing risks because of this remote work situation. So one of the things which come along with this remote workforce is that they are using their own devices. Okay, so your control on the device to some extent is reduced. In fact, even when you perhaps considered a BYOD, at least you had one environment in which you had much better, say, visibility than this home-based environment. So we are in a situation where there is increasing importance to the endpoint security. In fact, I'm reminded that in one of the RBI's documents, they said endpoint security is the responsibility of the bank. Okay, now I want you to actually react to how much of responsibility for endpoint security can be taken by the organization. Like perhaps, I don't know, you know what are the solutions and other things, but let us hear from you.
So in today's cloud-centric world and situation where many users are remote, and we want them often to be remote, right? Think of salespeople. They by default have to be remote, right? And historically, we probably underinvested, and now the tools that we are thinking of securing remote users can secure our salespeople as well. So endpoint security is probably one of the most fundamental tenets of a holistic integrated security architecture, other being identity security. So yes, organizations have to take accountability for endpoint security. Yes, if it is a company-owned asset, it is a lot easier. There are tools that are available today that can give a good deal of balance between security and user experience. Right? And it becomes a lot more difficult if it's a user-owned asset, like a user mobile, user tablet, iPad, user's own MacBook, stuff like that. And I think that's where the product vendors have made a lot of progress in managing this in a way that is flexible. Right? So think of MDM tools like Intune and all the potential that comes with tools like that. And it actually allows the CISOs like us and the CIOs to really think about where do we want to have this balance? How much of user friction, how much of security, how much of smoothness of user experience? And what kind of controls can you have that are transparent to the users? What kind of controls do you have that you want the users to know that you are introducing these controls? A good example is things like admin by request. You are not an admin by default, but if you want to install something, you were made an admin for that period of time, things like that. So I think that balance is now largely possible, and security and monitoring can be done fairly transparently to the user. But still, there is always that residual risk, and that is where user awareness becomes so much more important. And I remember, I think someone, Manoj, talked about the importance of user awareness, right? And it is that can never be wished away. We have to do, now there are tools for doing phishing simulations. Microsoft has its own tool, and there are startups which are building excellent tools for phishing simulations. So training the users to recognize what is a malicious email, how does it malicious URL, how does it recognize a top level domain, things like that. So we have to invest in user awareness, because that is the residual risk that will always remain.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Ravi now. We have been hearing a lot about zero trust, okay, architecture or say system or whatever way you would like to describe. How does that system relate to what we are discussing today as an integrated security approach, or an enhanced or next generation security approach? Okay, is zero trust the thing which is perhaps in the forefront, or is it just past the prime, or what do you think is the status of zero trust architecture in this security?
These terminologies, keep coming in waves. I think, as the threat landscape evolves, zero trust is not a new terminology. We always had something called as preventive control, or I think in some documentation, you would even see a term called preventative control. So when there was a time when there was a common, collective voice, which was saying that, security would come in the way of business. So there should be less of preventive controls, more of detective controls, and achieve that balance. But as the threat landscape has become more and more scarier, and security breaches have become more and more, having devastating impact on businesses, these terminologies have again come back, right? So, and particularly in this particular situation of remote operating model, it becomes very, very pertinent. It becomes very important to be able to say that, I do not trust anything unless I verify, right? So for our security systems, whether it is, let's say, our VPN that admits users into our network, or applications, or anything, it is important to verify the identity. I think Subro very rightly pointed out that that's an important element of any integrated security architecture. But also look at the posture on device, and that's again goes back to the previous question about whether organizations should take responsibility for the end user's devices. But at least to the extent of checking the posture, maybe allowing time for remediating any weaknesses in the posture. Those kind of things must be done, and I think there are more and more implementations like SASE and Secure Access Service Edge, etc. Those implementations, which include all these layers of defenses, whether it is multi-factor authentication, posture verification, some amount of data protection or data loss prevention, reverse proxy, you name it. All these elements are part of the solutions these days, and I think they're very relevant.
Okay, thank you. We have been discussing, and even Subarto also has spoke about this admin by request or something like that. Now, one of the things which I've been discussing in our framework of data protection security, which we call as data protection standard, is that the CISO, or let us say the DPO, that one single person sitting in the head office of an organization, how far he will be able to exercise effective control, particularly when the systems are distributed in different places, and with this remote handling, each employee is in a different location. So centralized monitoring of security is becoming a challenge. So we have been talking about distributed responsibility. That is, for us, every person is the CISO for his domain. Okay. So that as far as whatever is the data domain which has been given to him, that person must be responsible. He may be a software developer, code developer. He may say, I am not a CISO. I am not trained in information security. But in the current scenario, every person has to take accountability for information security within his domain, is what I have been referring to as distributed responsibility. So Naseem, can you add a thought on whether that is the way to go in future, even if this remote system of working may come down, but people say that even later more than 50% of the people will prefer to work only from home even after the pandemic is over. So it becomes almost a permanent requirement. So this concept of not expecting one single person with whatever designation and power to be able to control without much of accountability at every level. Do you think that is something which we have to think of as the architecture for information security governance? Let us look at it like that. Okay. Yeah, Naseem.
So first of all, I will completely agree with your concept. That should be the ideal approach. You cannot have, one person and, he or she might not be a Superman or might not have a superpower that he can control everything. It should be distributed. We should have, certain security coordinator. We should have, certain level of security discussion. Let's say if I talk about any insurance company, right? We have various departments. We have department like claims, we have department like actuary, we have department like ops. So every department, you should have one security spoke. He will be the person, or he will be your point of contact if something wrong happened or something they are thinking that this can be a risk to the organization. They should update this thing to the designated person. It can be a CISO, it can be anybody, right? That CISO position is mostly, I would say, somebody at the org level who will drive the force. What are the things, what are the basic checks we need to do, how we can do it. If something unusual comes, he or she will give the expertise to solve or give the expertise to handle the situation. And yes, in the same time, we also need to have one more guy at the, I would say, most probably it should be the head of the department, whoever it is. It might be HR guy, it might be finance guy, it might be ops guy. That, hey, this is what we are going to do at the org level, and it will be your responsibility to drive the same thing, drive the same control, drive the same process, technology, inform your people about the awareness, what are the things you can do, how you can do. And, I'd say, that should, if that is coming from the head of the department, the acceptability will be much more higher compared to, doing a security session or security awareness that, hey, this is what we are doing. Please don't do this 10 things, do not do these 5 things. I think that will be, much more effective if it's coming from a top of that, department. There are certain more things they can also, I think first line is always the best person who can analyze the risk, right? Because they have the better visibility in terms of business as well. And one more thing is that if the top of the line is talking about the risk, they will talk about the risk as per their business requirement, which is help them to refer, which is help them to understand how the risk is generating or how the risk is coming from. And I have seen one more thing, adding to that awareness part. I would always prefer that, give the awareness at a personal level. Let's see if I'm able to help you how you can secure your Facebook account or how you can secure your email account. And if I make sure that what is important in your Facebook account, what are the information you are putting publicly, how I can misuse. If you showcase this thing, believe me, once I will build that habit in myself, how exactly I'm going to save my own data. Believe me, whenever I will work for any corporate, any organization, I'm going to implement the same thing. So that should be the, I think that is.
Yeah. Now we will go around for one final round with all of you. Basically,
I actually, Mr. Navi, I just have maybe if you can just give me 1 minute, I'll just add to what Naseem mentioned.
Yeah.
See, we look at human as the weakest link, and we also look at human as the strongest link in the information security chain. And as you mentioned about the distributed, what I often say, and I used to say at my previous organization also, say security is a culture where you have to extend the responsibility to each and everyone in the organization. And while obviously CISO and management can be there as a driver to guide and to basically design and maintain the framework, but you want each and everyone in the organization to understand the importance of security in relation to the business. Information security can help you scale your business and can also be the reason to shut the shop or to bring huge losses. And that's where I also used to say it's a moving target. And more you do, the more challenges will be on your plate. And I think Mitali also mentioned it beautifully that it's actually a dynamic threat and scale. And you can't define what you have to do. Even let's say for next 1 year, you can't say this is my 1 year roadmap. By the time you reach there, you will probably see 10 other challenges.
Yep.
And that's where, while you obviously at the back end, you are struggling with and juggling with all those tools, all those dynamic changes, you want each and everybody in the organization to understand the importance and the culture of the security.
Thank you. So we'll have a very brief concluding remark from, say, Ravi, and followed by Mitali and Manoj, about anything else you want to say about this particular topic. Yeah, Ravi.
I think I completely agree with the co-panelists' thoughts about whether you call people as weakest link or strongest link. I have always believed, and I have demonstrated in my organization, that you have a layers of security tools in an integrated approach. You would address in 99.99% of the threats there that are known to you, but there would still be certain threats that would rely on human intelligence, that the employees need to use their judgment, right? Detect suspicious emails. And we've seen that some of those emails did have malicious links or something that needed to be blocked, right? So that's why I always call employees as the strongest link in the cybersecurity ecosystem. And I think in an integrated approach, you would need to rely on, as the organization grows, as the events per second grows, you would rely a lot on technology and automated decision making, but you would also rely a lot on specialists, skills, human intelligence, and ability to judge and make decisions.
Thank you. One word from Mitali.
Yeah, so I think Sachin and Ravi stole all the points that I had, but then I think it's very important, and I would say that from the experience that I have with my organization, I think it's very important whatever processes you have defined for your organization, whether they are really just on paper or they are actually being implemented, people are aware of it. Like, for example, it could be a simple process of onboarding a particular employee, or it could be a simple process of offboarding a particular employee, company exits, or just monitoring of your antivirus patching. I mean, organizations don't take the time to teach the employee why do they need to have these security patches done every month. What is this vulnerability management they are doing? What is this antivirus? Because I think if as an employee, I know why this is being done on my system, I will understand and I'll be a part of that system rather than questioning the system and saying that why this is being done. So, we, from our experience, we have tried to bring that into the culture right from the beginning. When we develop the processes, whenever we do that, we make it a point to make the employees aware of the processes. We make it a point that employees can reach out to the compliance team and question that, we don't understand this process, why this is being done. Because then, the employees themselves become the custodian of the information. They themselves become the owners. They take the ownership. It's a joint ownership, and it is not just the CISO or the board of directors who are responsible for it. So everybody becomes a part of that culture, and it comes into the DNA of the organization. So I think that's what is the key, that you make them a part of the process, have the processes which are effective and which are usable, not the processes which are just there to meet certain compliance requirements.
Thank you. Final word from Manoj.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things to say, but the basic thing is now the thought process of CISO should be more on the strategic than only technical. I mean, the CISO should also appraise leadership and board about information security in terms of business. I mean, how I do that, I did some stress test analysis and I converted the risk into risk mapping with solvency, and subsequently, if we require some additional working capital during that stress time. So, and then when it comes to CIO, then some different language. I mean, multi-hatting is required. Educating employee is, very important. But one thing is also very important, that the security is a discipline. It's a practice. It cannot be different for your personal life, professional life. What I started discussing more and more on their personal space, like cyberbullying, Paytm, KYC, this, that. Now I'm getting good response. I only have to launch the training. I get 100% completion very soon. So, I mean, the way of work should be a bit different. And the fact remains same, we were not safe, we are not safe, and we will never be safe. So it's always, good to be resilient than being strong. How soon can we detect? How soon can we recover? Last but not least, the investments should be wise and intelligent. I mean, there are a lot of technical controls, a lot of, controls available. It's not only about, bringing in so many products in the organization and making life of user miserable. No. So the decision, the investment should be wise, and, ROSI has to be calculated. And it's not only about implementing the control. Subsequently, effectiveness of control has also to be measured.
Thank you, friends. It has been an interesting discussion. I'm sure that there is so much to discuss and so much to talk, and time is always not fully available. But anyway, I'm sure that all the inputs you have given will be a great education for all of us who are listening to this. And we hope we will have other opportunities to take this discussion further. So thank you. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you.
Manoj, Naseem, and Mitali.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.